All right, no opening video tonight. We don't know what eyes are going to watch this video. Um, I have a feeling it might wind up having like a different audience than we usually have. So I didn't want to just make the whole thing jovial, juvenile jokes. While we're waiting for people to build in a little bit, Christian Wagner is a friend of ours. Christian, have we spoken on air since we hung out in North Carolina?
I don't think so. I don't think we have.
Not on air, right? Like me and you talk behind the scenes and stuff. But so yeah, we got to meet Christian when we went down to North Carolina recently. Spent a few hours hanging out with him, had a good time. Before we get into the subject matter, we are going to do a quick plug for Recusant. Recusant Cellars. They are a vineyard in Washington, right?
Oh my gosh, you're so
Come on,
bad
I
at
don't have this thing memorized yet. I should.
You told me to text it to you, so then I texted it to you, but yeah, you never have
I
it ready.
love when we fight over the ad read.
Yes, they're a
This
vineyard
poor
in
company.
Washington State.
Oh, this poor company.
They are openly and strongly Catholic and pro-life. If you go to requisinsellers.com and use code BASE25 at checkout, you'll get 10%
Base
off.
25? Awesome.
Yeah, but only 10% off.
You only get 10% off, but base 25. They might be like rad trad lunatics like we are, because they're the only company that supports us. So if you guys can, they're a great gift. Easter's coming up, might be a good one to order as an Easter gift.
If you order today, you'll probably get it before Easter. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys want to help support the show, go to Recusant Cellars. All right. So now to the subject at hand. We're not going to bury the lead tonight. So initial thoughts. I saw Matt posted the thumbnail and the title a couple of days before it actually aired, and I'm like, okay, wow, what angle is he going to take with this? And
the title being what?
What was the actual title?
Actually? It was like the Donald Trump, the woke right, and something else,
and the Ukraine war or something like that. And I hate the idea of even framing this conversation this way. But I do think that people genuinely don't know what it means.
The woke right part specifically.
I'm sorry. The woke right part. Like I don't know if people understand where this phrase comes from, what it means, why it's being thrown around so much. So I think we're going to have to get into like the origins of it. Who's the one behind this whole thing? We're going to play a couple of clips from that interview and just kind of go through it. When I threw the interview on, I was just kind of like taken back, like, whoa, because I like Father Charron. Like I genuinely like him. I think he's a really good priest. I think that he's like if I see him, I kind of my disagreements with him on the Ukraine war, I've always kind of looked at like, okay, this is very close to his heart. He has family over there. He knows people on the ground over there. I always gave him leeway to have a disagreement with me because this issue was so close to his heart. So I kind of just was like, all right, I get it. Like we can have a disagreement on it, and it never affected my view of him in any way because he felt this strongly about this issue. What's your experience with Father Charron, Christian?
I mean, Father Jason, I've spoken positively about him in the past. Actually, I was in a little bit of talks with somebody who worked with Father Jason, trying to spread a fundraiser that he was running to repair something in his church, because his church might actually have to, God forbid, shut down because one of a leak in their bell tower, basically. So if anybody's interested in that, I actually linked it in a post earlier. So I've always had a great deal of respect for him. We haven't had direct contact, but indirect, and I don't want to say anything bad about him as a priest. I mean, we want to keep this civil. Anthony actually called me and was like, I don't want to seem like we're being unkind to either Matt or Father Jason, because we do genuinely appreciate this. So I hope that this stream comes across in the right way, that we're not trying to, we're trying to approach this delicately and charitably, understanding that especially when it comes to matters like this of the temporal order, that there is a great degree of leeway in discussing these matters as practical. Okay, and did you want to discuss the whole origins of the woke right term, which is kind of what set off the alarms in the first place? Because for a lot of people who haven't heard this term woke right, it would seem really weird that we saw this, and I mean, like a lot of us were messaging behind the scenes
Yeah.
saying like, "Hey, this is coming out from Matt." Like we didn't know what it was going to contain. It ended up mostly being about the Ukraine war, which for my personally, I don't care too much about the Ukraine war. But I understand that a lot of other people do have strong feelings about it, and they can or cannot if they so wish. But seeing this term woke right was such an alarm for me because of what the opposite of woke right represents, which is a mainstream conservatism that is basically practically libertarian in nature. It is socially liberal. It's invented by James Lindsay, who is an atheist who definitely does not espouse Catholic political theology.
James Lindsay wants a democratic, secular Enlightenment utopia. He's stated several times he wants to be. He thinks like 1996 was the greatest time in the history of the world, and everything he's doing. This term woke right is basically used as a shoe-in word for anti-Semite. That's essentially what it is. So basically the word racist, the word anti-Semitic, those words lost their sting completely. But over the last couple of years, the term that actually did work was calling things woke. Mm-hmm. So we called things woke on the left. Everybody was just like, I don't like this woke thing. I don't like that. So in place of anti-Semitic, James has decided just call anybody who criticizes Israel in any way whatsoever, just call them woke right. That's all it really comes down to. I mean, he acts like he has this whole philosophy behind it, but that's essentially what he's getting at.
It's just another way for people on the left to call us Nazis, basically.
Correct. I think it goes a degree further, though, because I mean, I've seen other areas which this touches, which I think that when it comes to Father Jason and Matt, that they would not be okay with. So, for example, James Lindsay will also point to those who in any way are collectivists.
Yeah.
And collectivism basically means, oh, you want religion to have a role in government? Well, then you're woke right. Oh, you want to support maybe economic policies that are not like Milton Friedman, basically like a very classical liberal model of economics. You don't want like free trade. You think that some sort of government planning actually is helpful to the economy. Oh, you're woke right. And I think that Father Jason, and I mentioned this to Anthony in our phone call that we had on Sunday, I said, well, Father Jason even indicated in this interview that he thought that there were huge problems with oligarchs in Ukraine, to where a lot of the industries in Ukraine should continue to be ran and owned by the Ukrainian government so it doesn't go into the hands of oligarchs. That is something that James Lindsay himself would frame as woke right. And I think that, I mean, I would like to chalk this up to, and forgive me for using this term, but like boomerisms, to where obviously Father Jason and Matt are a little bit younger than the boomer generation. Basically this idea of somebody who is, a bit less involved in internet culture.
Yeah.
And sometimes they use terms incorrectly. And woke right definitely is a term which I believe here is just being completely misconstrued.
Yeah.
And it's being more so used as a slur than it is as an actual basis for debate. Because I commented this on the original Pints with Aquinas interview. I said, well, when you said woke right, you said woke right is against the principles of Christendom. I said, well, isn't James Lindsay the guy who is an atheist, individualist, enlightenment LARPer?
Rob, pull up James Lindsay's tweet, the screenshot I sent you of James Lindsay where he says thinking about becoming pretending a Christian. So James Lindsay saw this coming. Now his biggest fear is some kind of Christian nationalism uprising, right? Like he sees that the younger generation specifically is fed up with liberalism in general. So he puts this out in May of last year, almost a year to the day, thinking about pretending to be Christian so I can tell Christians how bad they are at being Christian, and they'll have to listen to me. Now, most of the conversations I have seen James involved in are in Christian areas, telling Christians how they're not acting Christian. He's because people underestimate this guy, and I've seen people say James Lindsay he's an idiot, he's stupid. This guy is not stupid by any stretch of the imagination. He has studied Marxism like very thoroughly. He's well known for getting these papers submitted that like I wish I knew like the exact thing that he did, but he got some papers submitted through peer review or something, and they were just like literally like Mein Kampf, that he changed a few of the words in, but he submitted Mein Kampf.
The Communist Manifesto.
The Communist Manifesto, things like that he got submitted through peer review and it got passed through and stuff. The guy understands how Marxism works, and he understands that accuse others of what you yourself are doing is like Marxism 101. It's like Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, you know? And that's what it seems like he is doing in my mind. He's not a dumb guy. He knows exactly what he's doing. So
yeah, Rob, could you share what I just presented real quick? Yeah, so this is a chart that he made, but what you see is like things like once state religion, Christianity, collectivists, once more government power, believes power matters more than truth, obsessed with racial identity, hates Jews. So these are the things that James Lindsay thinks is woke right. Obviously, there's certain things which are more disputed in Catholic circles, but something like one state religion, I mean, come on. He basically applies this to anybody of the Christian nationalists who simply want a return to basically what everyone prior to about 75 years thought about authority of Christianity and government.
Even him showing blames women on the right. Now, look, I understand like the manosphere has gotten a little out of control and they're, a bit brash, but I think the younger generation sees how much feminism has rotted our culture. Like so many of these things, if you break down each one, there's a reason people are really upset with them. This isn't just a throwaway issue where you could just say, oh, blames women. That's the woke right. Like there's many things that go into this. Even the conversations that are going on right now are a lot different than they were five years ago. And I think people are shocked by them, but the younger generation has not been subjected to the same propaganda that the older generations have. And I think that's, a lot of their stories are losing their power.
Exactly.
So, all right. Do you want to just get into playing some of the clips and we'll go through it and we'll break down. So the first one right off the bat is him framing Judeo-Christian, which I think is hugely problematic right off the bat. So we'll play that clip real quick.
Prior to Trump being elected, it was a lot easier, I think, for group cohesion when we defined ourselves perhaps not by what we were, but by what we were against. We're against the left. We're against wokeism. Now that Trump and the administration have come to power, I'm noticing a lot of infighting and trying to figure out who we are. It feels like that's a lot more difficult. Like figuring out what we are and what we're about is actually a more difficult thing than just defining yourself by what you're against.
Yes.
And so right now it seems like the right, to use political language, is trying to figure that out. What are you seeing?
Actually,
I see that as reflected in the church's history. We had, the first few centuries, we had numerous, bishops and authorities, theologians condemning and attacking various heresies. Irenaeus of Lyon attacking Gnosticism and, the Judaizing heresy of the 1st and 2nd century. And there are lots of Orthodox writers, denouncing what they're against. But only by the year 325 and actually by 380 does the church put forth kind of a symbol of faith, as it's called, the creed, as it's translated, and this is what we're for. So it took over 3 centuries for the church to be able to do that, and I see that as well as our society and our culture kind of implode, seeing that it removed the pillars of the Judeo-Christian foundation of our society.
That's it, right?
We
there.
have
I just wanted to touch on that real quick because even that. Framing it as Judeo-Christian, I really do see this as a problem. This is crazy talk to say.
He's implying that the Nicene Creed is Judeo-Christian?
It's fundamentally different. I think you could really tell just by going back to Matt Fradd's conversation with what was his name? Prager, when they had that conversation about pornography. Like, a lot of people think because the Jews have the Old Testament that they're, that it's like they have half of our religion. So they have the same, they have the same moral foundation that we do. And they absolutely do not. And when you really get into what Matt talked about with Dennis Prager in that conversation, there's no such thing to them as lust of the heart, of sins of the heart. It's like action. So it comes down to what Jesus was actually upset with the Pharisees about. It's that they were finding ways to skirt the rules so that they could technically say they're obeying the law, but completely missing the point of the law that was given. So to say that the West is built on these Judeo-Christian pillars is just a flat out lie.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit disingenuous. Obviously not saying that, I'm talking in itself, obviously not saying that Father Jason intended this, but this phrase Judeo-Christian, because when we think of that term Judeo, we think of Judeo in terms of contemporary Judaism, in terms of Judaism as we interact with it now. Judaism as we interact with it now is not the same as, essentially speaking, as Second Temple Judaism or even Old Testament Judaism. There is a long history of explicit anti-Christian elements within the moral theology, within the political theology, and with every other aspect of theology within Judaism that is meant to be something which is posited on the fundamental postulate that they are against Christianity. So the term Judeo-Christian, if Judeo is taken in the completely obvious sense that anyone is going to take it, it is a complete contradiction in terms. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. If you even listen to like a Roy Schumann's conversion story, he's like, they ingrain it in your head if you're growing up Jewish that you could become Buddhist, you could become anything. They don't care. You could be atheist, you could be Buddhist, you could even there's no limit to what religion you can choose as long as you don't choose Jesus. Like, there is an implicit adversarial relationship between Christianity and Judaism. There's not modern Judaism. And even actually anything after they get thrown out of Jerusalem in 70 AD, there's this adversarial relationship. And I think that we've lost our sense of that in modern culture because we have after World War II, you have this victim narrative that comes out about what the Jews endured during World War II, so that the church even changes its language towards them and things like that. So we all kind of have a different understanding of that adversarial relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's something which is fundamental. And I think this is something that gets forgotten, is there are certain fundamental notions of people groups. Like there's a sort of founding myth that gets imbibed in us as we grow up. Like, as Americans, there is a founding myth that we are imbibed with when it comes to American history. And when it comes to Judaic history, everything from very conservative Jews to the most liberal Jews, the fact that Christians are the boogeymen and the fact that they are opposed to Christian and specifically European civilization is something which gets imbibed. And especially within an even more specific subset of this is right wing. They are opposed to right wing. They're opposed to collectivism. They're opposed to any sort of racial identity that is present among white people. These are things among the Jews, and I understand why they think this way. Obviously, I can understand why they think this way while also disagreeing, to where the attributes of Christian, specifically Catholic, and white European and right wing, these three are like completely in opposition to the very fundamentals of modern Judaism. So how can we even speak of a Judeo-Christian civilization that is going to retain our all three forms of those identities? The thing is, we can't think of one, which is the whole point.
No, the term
For
is
people like James
oxymoronic.
Lindsay, we just need to destroy all three of those aspects, which is what he's opposed to.
They're like contradictory terms. They really are. And I It's look, we did a video the other day where we said like I have this intuition that this issue is going to be super divisive going forward. I kind of don't want to talk about it that much, but every time I turn around, the freaking conversation is everywhere. Douglas Murray just debated Dave Smith. We're actually going to play a clip of Fuentes on the local segment that I think is very interesting, but we'll get into that over on locals. But it's just everywhere, right? I just watched Catholic Unscripted, had Father Maudsley on to discuss the liturgy, and then the next day Gavin Ashenden comes out and basically like refutes every single thing that was said in that interview. I think that this is going to be a very difficult issue going forward. Now, how we handle it, it's like this. It's very much has to not be about a dislike or a hatred of a people. This very much has to be a theological issue for us. I mean, this story goes back to the Old Testament, from Cain and Abel to Esau and Jacob, to every parable Christ tells about, even about the prodigal son. About it's the covenant goes to the younger, the younger brother. The older brother gets jealous, and then the older brother lashes out over it. So I think if we're not aware of that and understand the significance of it, it's going to be a problem for us if we're just naive to it. And I see a lot of things going on, even with like Trent Horn with the Philos Project, and I see right after Trent does the Philos Project thing, I saw Matt wrote a thing on his Substack about a dialogue between a person who was being accused of anti-Semitism, and it seemed like a very concerted effort at propagandizing Catholics, and that worried me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the central issues of our times, and as you mentioned, there are a lot of Catholic figures, especially in the generation, your guys' generation, the generation older than me. A lot of these figures are connected. There are a bunch of connected figures who have a goal in mind and a status quo to keep. And this isn't just simply something of a simply theological matter. This isn't something which is merely speculative. This is very practical. I mean, for myself, Father Jason, he framed it in a very odd way. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, I'm assuming. The way that Father Jason framed it is, and this is the way in which almost every one of the philo-Semitic propagandizers out there will frame it, is Israel's right to defend itself on just war principles. I obviously, more than most, agree with the right of a nation to protect itself on just war principles. But the right of a nation to protect itself on just war principles does not somehow extend to any sort of method being appropriate. And there are methods which Israel has used which are objectively inappropriate. If somebody comes and tries to break into my house and harm my family, I have the right to defend myself. I don't have the right to go to his apartment building, kill his family, and kill all the families around him. That's not a right that I have to self-defense. And I think it's very unfortunate the way in which this debate is being framed, because I think we could have a great degree of agreement. I do think that when we talk with one another one-on-one between these two sides, if we framed it properly, if we distilled the theses into clear ways, I do think we could actually have a lot of agreement. But unfortunately, a lot of current events and a lot of politics ends up being propagandizing, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah, I think there is a danger that they're seeing as well. Like Rob and I talked about this last time. It's like there's a segment of people who, once they kind of get cued in on this topic, all they see is Jews everywhere. And it's just like you wind up seeing people get so obsessed with it, and then they start saying horrific things. And I think these guys are generally worried about violence. Like they're worried about seeing another pogrom type incident happening. And I'm not saying their fears are completely unjustified. I'm not saying any of that. My concern is by participating in the propaganda on behalf of Israel, are you then ignoring the actual problem that is going to be our issue, which would be the older brother coming at us down the line? So let's get into the Father Jason clip. The next clip, it's this is where they actually discuss the woke right.
the woke left, at least in the last decade, but people are beginning to use a new phrase, the woke right. What is that? What's your opinion of it?
Yeah. Again, it's this. A lot of this is the movement of out of that toho and bogo, out of formlessness and wasteland. Everything in Scripture is the archetype for our understanding ourselves and our society. And I see this with the woke right as well, as I call it.
What is that? What does that mean?
It's people who
he just said like as I call it. He said the woke right as I call it, which is like, I was like, wait, what is going on here? Okay,
as almost nobody else calls it. Unfortunately.
It's not him attempting to explain what other people are saying about the. He's like, well, the woke right as I call it, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here?
I'll put it this way. The Israelites, they left Egypt.
Yeah.
And they get their freedom. They're free from the house of slavery. And what do?
They worship a golden calf.
They worship the golden calf, which was worshipped by the Egyptians. And they revert to the old slavery. They slouch and long after the old slavery. And so what we see with the woke right are people who have come into the house, but they are infected by the old idols still. And that is, their positions are emotive, and they're not based on faith and reason. And so they're against things, just like the anger of the old leftists. They're angry. They're against patriarchy. They're against the institution of institutional Christianity. They're against all this. What are you for? Well, we don't know. And so what we have in the woke right are people who are against the evils of the left.
Okay.
And they're not for the principles that formed Christendom. And so you see this with for example, with regard to Israel and this insurgent anti-Semitism. You see this with regard to Ukraine, and both of which are against right reason. Both of which are against just war theory, which is reasonable. Both of which are.
There's more. Honestly, I don't know what that first part is supposed to mean. People who do things emotively and are not based on faith and right reason. I mean, isn't that like every single Republican member of Congress right now? Isn't that, God forbid, often the president himself? I mean, this is describing things in such a manner does not lead to understanding, but is a mere disputation about words causing conflict. It's just very unfortunate that this type of way of defining it, I don't even know what this is supposed to mean. James Lindsay falls under this definition, who invented the term for other people. It's unfortunate.
I'm finding like a big thing where anybody that supports Israel also supports Ukraine, which is troubling to me. Like I saw Douglas Murray with the Dave Smith debate, him supporting Ukraine and Israel. And I think it has to do with Israel gets attacked on October 7th and they have a right to defend themselves. Ukraine gets invaded by Russia and they have a right to defend themselves. I think that's where the roots of it come. The difference is I see Ukraine as the actual victim of not just Russia, but America and NATO. Like they're kind of just these pawns that are being used. I don't think Ukraine did anything to instigate this war. I do think they have a right to defend against an incursion by another country, things like that. But I just think they're pawns, and they're just they're fighting. They're basically the way the U.S. is fighting its proxy war against Russia. So I kind of forgive him for his Ukraine stance. But the idea that Israel is fighting under just war theory. So we have a Thomist with us. I had Rob pull up a few quotes by St. Thomas on just war. And I want to kind of go through this so people understand that there is no possible way you could say Israel is fighting under just war principle. Like none.
You want them now?
Yeah, let's pull them up. Let's just go through them. So, but war is contrary. Oh,
hold on. Start with I answered that.
Okay, I answer that. In order for a war to be just, three things are necessary. First, the authority of the sovereign. sovereign by those who by whose command the war is to be waged. For it is not the business of a private individual to declare war, because he can seek for the redress of his rights from the tribunal of his superior. Moreover, it is not the business of a private individual to summon together the people, which has to be done in wartime. And as the care of the common weal is committed to those who are in authority, it is their business to watch over the common weal of the city, kingdom, or province. You have to go down to where it's all right.
Yeah, so I mean, the first one is like basically like I can't declare war on like Washington D.C. or something because I feel like it. It would have to be somebody
the
proper
authorities
authority.
have to be the ones to declare the war. A just cause is required, namely that those who are attacked should be attacked because they deserve it on account of some fault. Wherefore, Augustine says, a just war is wont to be described as one that avenges wrongs, when a nation or state has to be punished for refusing to make amends for the wrongs inflicted by its subjects or to restore what has been seized unjustly. This is where it gets tricky, because people want to act like this war started on October 7th. But the whole state of Israel coming into being, they seized that land unjustly in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like this land was seized unjustly from the people that were living there, and it involved a genocide of the people that lived there. So, like, if you're going to go back to the roots of it, that's where it starts.
Yeah, I mean, the first terrorists in the Middle East were Jews who were terrorists against the British Empire. Those were the first terrorists in the Middle East.
They invented car bombing.
Yeah, it's any terrorist group in the Middle East who currently exists is simply following the example of the Jews and what the Jews did to the British. Unfortunately, this was something continued after the invention of the Israeli state. And there's this idea, because obviously we don't affirm that Israel has a divine right to the land. And it's kind of awkward whether we talk about them having even a natural right. Yeah. There's sometimes in which we say they don't have a natural right, and sometimes in which we do speak of a right which is like acquired. So, like, for example, if your great grandfather stole, the house in which you live in, after a few generations, it ends up by the laws of inheritance kind of saying like, okay, well, you can't really kick the family out of the house. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to the founding of the state of Israel, those Palestinians, and something St. Thomas is going to say in the third section there, is that the right intention. So, for example, he brings up the preservation of religion. So obviously, we know that Islam is a false religion. But when it comes to the judgment of moral acts, we look at the intended object, not necessarily the object materially considered. So the intention of those countries which declared war on Israel was to defend those of the same religion and those of the same racial identity with themselves, or general cultural identity. So in the same way as maybe I would want to defend the British from an invasion of foreigners and from the seizing of their land, in the same way Egypt might want to defend Palestinians. So ironically, the most just war which has been waged in the Middle East since the 1940s has been the war waged against Israel by the coalition of Arab states. Now, something else that St. Thomas is going to bring up, and he brings this up constantly, is like, you not only do you have to have right intention, you also have to have a right manner of operating. There's obviously collateral damage always in wars. You can't have any war without collateral, but you can't do this as something reckless. No. You have to measure and try to reduce collateral damage as much as you can. And Israel has engaged in this war in a very reckless way. And this is something the church itself has recognized. This is something which Father Jason's superiors, His Holiness Pope Francis, those who most intimately know the situation in Gaza, such as Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Vatican Secretary of State, Parolin, almost everybody with any matter of temporal say within the Vatican and within the church, both on extrinsic basis of authority and intrinsic basis of authority, anyone there has said about this war, it is being unjustly done.
Yeah.
I don't get how somebody can can chalk this up as being woke right. I mean, is Pope Francis woke right? Is Cardinal Parolin woke
completely
right? Is Cardinal
insane.
Pizzabola
It's
woke right?
completely insane. And God, Rob.
Israel actually has a term for how they wage these military actions. They call it mowing the grass. And the idea is that basically once per generation, they wait for a provocation to go into Palestinian territories and mow the grass, which is basically military aged men. And they do this once a generation to keep the Palestinian down,
Armed forces
basically.
down. Yeah.
And that's literally how they plan these operations, to go and just wipe out a whole generation of young men.
Can you think of another area in the world whose average 18 is 18? I mean, average age is 18.
Mm-mm.
Why have you ever asked yourself why Gaza's average age is 18?
And it's always 18. It's always that same average age.
Mm-hmm. It's brutal. It's barbaric. I don't know how anybody with a with an intimate knowledge of the situation could be, at least if one wanted to tend more towards disbelief or suspension of belief in primary reports, at least to understand where other people are coming from who do give credence to primary reporting on the ground, and to somehow not to have the moderation not to accuse that other person of being an anti-Semite or any other litany of charges that they're going to level against us.
Yeah, this is a good comment, though. So the problem with being pro-Palestine is you herd it into the same category as the communists who are on college campuses and supporting Hamas and stuff. But just because some side gets something right doesn't mean you go against it. Like that, I think that's a big problem that we're seeing in politics in general right now. It's like Trump will do something outrageous and everybody sees the left go nuts and they think it must be good because the left hates it, but the left just hates everything Trump does. So there's going to be things that you guys should stand your ground on and be like, this is awful what Trump is doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like starting war with Iran on behalf
yeah,
of
and I also think that we another point that I would bring up to Father Jason is that we can't understand this war, this fight with the Palestinians in isolation from what happens in the entire region. Yeah. We went into Iraq and hundreds of thousands of people died in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in basically any in Libya, in any one of the wars that we had in the region. Yeah, Syria. And the reason for this, Libya, and the great, and what's so absurdly frustrating is look at the percentage of the population of those nations that were Christian in 1940 versus today. I mean, some of these countries were 20, 30% Christian, and now a lot of them can barely get up to 5%. It's awful. It's something which not only do my fellow religionists, Catholics and Orthodox Christians and Protestants and such, not only my fellow religionists being slaughtered or being driven out of their homeland because of this, but also my fellow countrymen are going into these countries and dying. And generally speaking, there are a lot of people who, a lot of them are Muslims who are dying in these wars who would otherwise be alive if it wasn't for what was going on. Destabilized countries, starving children from broken economies. It's brutal, it's barbaric, and
and this isn't just
in isolation.
Look, because a lot of people think I'm being soft on this issue. Like I read an article about Paul Singer yesterday about some of the investments he makes. Paul Singer goes and he buys up the debt of countries on the verge of collapse, for pennies on the dollar. And then when the country goes into default, he fights a 15-year battle to make sure they pay those debts at full price. It's a 20-year battle that he goes into, and he impoverishes a nation. Like this is a way of doing business for certain people. Like they don't care about human suffering whatsoever. There's absolutely no regard for human life in just the suffering people from this group will cause if it means they're going to make money or it's going to expand their Zionist project. So it's like
it should also be noted that radical groups like Hamas were actually largely supported by Israel, both largely financially, in order to drive
opposition,
the Christian population away from the Palestinian cause and things like that. So the Islamist kind of faction of these nations are largely created by Israel.
Yeah, I mean it's getting so the provocations are getting so bad. I have a lot of very pro-Zionist family members, and I was talking with one of my family members, and I was like this is I think that President Trump and much of his cabinet has the at least a more sober mindset about Iran. You know, a war with Iran, like I'm just telling you guys, if you look at the logistics behind it, this isn't like Iraq. I mean, Iran is much bigger, much better equipped, much larger population, an army that's actually loyal to the Ayatollah. It's going to be something which effectively will bankrupt us. It's going to be something where a lot of American soldiers will die. Nobody wins by a war with Iran. The best situation for everyone except one group is diplomacy. And even with that family member, when I was talking to them about this, they were like, "Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Netanyahu's off his rocker with the way in which he's going about this." The pro-war party within Israel, they're absolutely bloodthirsty, and they're chomping at the bit for this conflict because Iran is basically the last power in the region. No, okay. Don't take this wrong way.
You say Iran and Iraq. I'm loving it.
Iran is the last power in the region who is opposing the Zionist state. It's just
you have to say it like George W. Bush. You have to say Iraq,
Iran.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, their proxies or whatever you want to call them, those groups that they fund, they're really the only thorn in the side of Israel and the only power. Which before, like, look at 1990, how many powers there were that Israel was scared of. Now the only one left is Iran.
Dude, it's funny that you're saying you had this, Zionist family member. I had my father over yesterday for Palm Sunday, and trying to break my boomer dad out of the pro-Zionist. Wait, Wagner, if you pronounce Iraq like that again, the spirit of George Bush will come after you. But having my father over and just like I know who my dad listens to. My dad's listening to Sean Hannity. He's listening to what's his name?
Glenn Beck.
Not even Glenn Beck. He's listening to no, he's listening to the oh man, what the heck is his name? He's another guy on Fox News. He's on like Sundays or something. He's a Jewish guy. Freaking oh man, why can't I think of his name? Anyway, my dad watches Fox News, and I'm like, do you have any idea what you're saying right now? I'm like, and I try to like just break him out of it a little bit, and he's just like, he started off kind of hearing me out a little bit, and then he was like, no, they're savages, those people over there. You can't. I'm like, oh man, it's not about that, Dad. It's like, I don't know. It's very hard to look. Mark Levin. That's who it is.
Oh yeah,
Mark Levin. Like that's who my dad's
listening.
listening to. He's listening to Mark Levin and Hannity and all those guys. You know, he was like a huge Rush Limbaugh guy, my dad. But it's just to get the older generation. You saw it even in the Catholic Unscripted thing that happened, where Catherine and Mark are a little younger. Gavin's older. He grows up. He's listening to. There's 200 World War II movies a year put out from Hollywood. It's insane. These guys grow up watching every single thing about, like, every movie. Every year the Oscars is a Holocaust, but even this year in 2025, the two Oscar movies were The Brutalist, who's a concentration camp survivor who comes to America and he's gay and all this stuff. Then the other one is with
at least that was realistic.
Macaulay Culkin's brother, Kieran Culkin, and him and his cousin go to Poland to go to Auschwitz and all this. It's like this narrative is just nonstop forced down our throats, even in 2025. But when you're coming right out of World War II, it's so much stronger. And it's like they get rid of Christian history in schools, and all they teach is Holocaust history. And this is just what it is. It's so to get older guys to break from that narrative is very, very difficult. And I think that I've seen the conversation shift a lot in the last 2 years since October 7th. I think Israel is severely losing the propaganda war, like really,
Yeah.
really badly.
Majority of Americans now don't
Yep.
support Israel unconditionally.
The
Yeah.
only group that does is 50-year-old plus Republicans.
The rhinos.
Crazy.
We're coming
It's
for you.
crazy.
We're coming
Yeah.
for you, rhinos.
But what worries me, there's two things that worry me in that. It's that one, they're not going to lose the narrative. So you see this huge propaganda push. Like all I see on Twitter is Douglas Murray's amazing. Oh my goodness, Douglas Murray's amazing. It's like nonstop being pushed. Every other tweet, it's all I'm seeing. But the other thing is there's even an admission from Wagner is the guy who says Shay Shay when picking up his Chinese
I don't know
food.
what that means.
I don't either.
I think it means thank you, probably, or something like that.
Oh.
Shay. The other thing that worries me is there's this like admission from even the Trump White House that the liberal economic order that was set up after World War II is over, and people are kind of done with that myth that has held our culture up. And when I see that, I think they need a new huge event to start a huge new myth and narrative to set up a new culture on. And that worries.
And to clarify for the audience, when we're talking about the myths surrounding World War II, we're not necessarily saying that every event as purported is ahistorical. Rather, what we're saying is that there's a certain narrative of good guy, bad guy that gets played to where the Allies did everything immaculately, and we were fighting the whole time to end the Holocaust and such like this. But really, obviously, we know from like a reasonable study of primary sources that this whole big narrative of the Allies being immaculate, we were doing the whole thing to save the Jews. We knew about it the whole time. We were just trying to save them. We know that this is just like not true at all. And therefore, the sort of post-World War II consensus, this ends up being that, nationalist, right-wing, that's bad, evil, mustache man. He espoused all of this. And what's good is a sort of moderate left, socially liberal, pro-Zionist sort of ideology.
You think about where the conservative movement is today. Think about who Trump is. Trump is Bill Clinton from the 90s. Like there is no conservatism today. Like what have we conserved? We've conserved nothing. Trump has a gay man with a surrogate child in his cabinet. I mean, and they're like held up. Like, oh, look, we're not gay. Like, we're not homophobic. It's like, it's insane how much the Overton window has shifted over the past couple of years.
This is Brother Wagner is a true Arab.
So true. He's real for that.
All right, so let's play the rest of that clip. I think we were like 2 minutes in. Did you lose the place mark on it, Rob?
Sure did, but that's okay. I'll get it back. Let's just see where we are here.
They get their freedom. They're free from the house of slavery. And what do?
They worship a golden calf.
They worship the golden ouch and long.
They hate Israel.
Old slavery. And so what we see with the woke right are people who
From here.
into the house, but they are infected by the old idols still. And that is their positions are emotive, and they're not based on faith and reason. And so they're against things, just like the anger of the old leftists. They're angry. They're against patriarchy. They're against the institution of institutional Christianity. They're against all this. What are you for? Well, we don't know. And so what we have in the woke right are people who are against the evils of the left.
Okay.
And they're not for the principles that formed Christendom. And so you see this for example, with regard to Israel and this insurgent anti-Semitism. You see this with regard to Ukraine, and both of which are against right reason. Both of which are against just war theory, which is reasonable. Both of which are against compassion and charity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm seeing.
So people who you might accuse of being anti-Semites or anti-Ukraine, he may not use that language, I think would protest. They would say, actually, anti-Semitism is a word. It's sort of like when people would use the word racism to shut down a discussion. I think that's what they feel when they're being told you're an anti-Semite. And I think they would also have their reasons for not supporting Ukraine monetarily, but at the same time wouldn't wish any harm upon them. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, it is. I think the worst form of cowardice, and intellectual and moral cowardice, is.
Didn't he just mention something about the other side not having charity? Like,
that's why I wanted you to keep playing a little bit,
Okay.
because this cowardice line is really.
I'll back it up a little and start.
Yeah, just back it up a drop, but just because what he says here is outlandish.
Cowardice is evacuating yourself from the present moral fight of our age, and you find reasons to evacuate yourself from those causes that are the causes that define moral virtue in our day and age. And I think that with regard to Israel, with regard to Ukraine, there is a very clear case in both scenarios, different zip codes, but both same principle applies. Is that the affronted victim has a right to use just and equal force to repel the unjust aggressor.
You can pause
once everything else has been.
So, all right, there's a couple of things there. Matt is framing that as a devil's advocate question and trying to present the other side of point of view. But I do know Matt is also concerned with this issue. Like, you could tell he is. That's kind of why he's framing the question that way.
Yeah.
The idea that we are not on the side of Ukraine and Israel because of moral cowardice is shocking and offensive.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is, because it doesn't seem like when it comes to those who are for the war in Israel that they're being the ones who are, exposed, doxxed, blocked, kicked off of different websites, kicked out of college, their entire careers get ruined. I mean, it's not those people. It's actually quite easy. It's one of the easiest things to do in the United States of America, especially in conservative spheres, to be pro-Israel. So I just do not understand how it can in any way be cowardly.
No, I think it's the opposite.
The Zionist entity.
I think it's the total opposite. Like, even this conversation we're having, it's like you're risking your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You're like I don't want to have this conversation. I feel like it's like a moral duty to have it. Like, my conscience bothers me to not have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have it a different way if I could speak freely and not have to worry about any of those things. But I also have to worry about being like, we're at a point where if you're unwilling to be labeled with the accusation of anti-Semitism, I don't know how you're going to make it going forward, because that's going to be the first thing they lob at you, and it's going to get much worse. And I think that this is going to be where the persecution starts to get riled up. Like, it's if you're the one pushing the propaganda for the Philos Project, I think you are going to enable the coming persecution that will come against Catholics who have to stand their ground on this, because this is insane what they are doing, not just in the Middle East, but even just using America as their guard dog to go and do their bidding throughout the world. It's really it's pretty appalling.
I think something that I found to be the most frustrating, and this is a habitual problem in parts of this interview that are meant to oppose the woke right. I found it to be most frustrating, and I guess I'll phrase it like this. There's a sort of traditional teaching of the spiritual authors that when you make resolutions, like you want to make a spiritual resolution to overcome some vice or to acquire some virtue, you need to make that resolution particular. Like, you can't just say like, oh, I'm going to detest the world. You have to say, oh, well, I'm going to detest the world in this way or in this way, and then doing these things. You have to be very specific, because a general sort of rebuke is just kind of useless if you're not pointing to particular people, particular issues, and particular solutions, particular arguments against those positions. You're just kind of doing what we normally phrase as virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Not actually trying to attack a particular position. So what I found to be so frustrating is these rebukes and explanations and arguments are so general that, like I joked earlier, I mean, who are we talking about? Are we talking about James Lindsay when you're describing the woke right? I mean, this describes a bunch of people who conventionally would not be described as the woke right. So when you stay in generalities, we're not able to go forward in this conversation that we need to have between generations with respect and understanding.
And the thing with the Ukraine war also, I have to say, like, I want nothing but peace over there. Like, I want that war over. I have a 19-year-old son, and I do not want my son going to war in Ukraine. Like, I'm sorry if that's cowardice. No, I don't want my son going over to go fight in Ukraine for a war that America provoked, because America did provoke that war. America provoked Russia, and now Ukraine I see as innocent victims in this stupid chess game that America and Russia have been playing, and it finally came to head, and they're the ones suffering for it. So, no, I don't want my son going over to fight in that war. I'm sorry. So I want peace at all costs. I want to stop seeing the death of so many young Ukrainian men who've lost all chance at the next generation. Like, you killed so many people in this war. There's an entire generation of Ukrainian men who will never have families because of this.
Something that
in Russian men too.
In Russia too, yeah.
Something that Father Jason said correctly is that this is a population game for Russia. It absolutely is. Like, Russia wants to. They have a vested interest in increasing their population due to replacement issues. This is absolutely true. And we also need to consider the fact that one of the effects of this war is really the mass slaughter of an entire generation. Like, how are they supposed to replace now? I mean, is anybody going to immigrate to Ukraine? Is anybody going to immigrate to Russia? Those aren't exactly immigration hotspots for, maybe that's how we'll clean up all the immigrants which need to be brought into Europe through Israel's latest aggression. Maybe we'll just send them to Ukraine and Russia, and we can get all the population increase from the mass slaughter of young men. It's heartbreaking, and it doesn't need to be like this. It absolutely doesn't need to be like this.
So okay, so now I want to go over to locals now, and I want to talk. I want to play a Fuentes clip. I think he's an important person in this conversation. Like, he really is. I know a lot of people don't like him, but he's saying a lot of things that need to be discussed. So we're going to go over there. We're going to talk about something he said. Also, me and Rob are going to fight it out to see how old your kid should be before you let them watch The Passion. This might be, if you guys join locals, you might see the next co-sleeping fight. So I would want to see this one if I were you guys, because me and Rob said something very hurtful to me on Twitter yesterday.
I actually held back the really good ones.
Oh, I'm sure you did. I saw you boiling. Rob got home late yesterday. He was cranky.
I was not.
He fired off on Twitter, and I go, should I respond? I go, this will start a war right now. Let me just let him cool down. I know Rob's in one of his melancholic dumps, so just let him do his thing. So, all right. So we're gonna go over to locals. Christian, you're gonna hang still, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, guys, if you are not a local subscriber, please come over there. That's where we have the actual conversations that we can't have over on YouTube. Matt, Father Jason, we love you guys. Actually, I actually donated to holyprotectionshrine.org, which is Father Jason's trying to build a Marian shrine. So I went on his site and I donated to it. I think that is actually the way out of all of these different disagreements that we're all having between each other. Is just run to Our Lady. And he's trying to build a shrine to Our Lady, and I want to help that happen in any way possible. I have no ill will towards Matt or Father Jason. I honestly think
except for Matt never having him on, but
oh, stop. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't see how he could.
Join the club. Join the club, Anthony. Join the club. He follows me on Twitter now. Does he follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, and Matt follows me on Twitter. Me and Matt have each other's phone numbers. I actually texted Matt before this show and sent him the screenshot. I said, listen, I want to handle this charitably. This conversation.
You did that after making me change the thumbnail.
Well, because I knew the conversation was actually going to be about, like,
Yeah.
I knew we were going to discuss just war, but I knew the main conversation was going to be about woke rights. So Rob originally didn't watch the interview, right?
No, I didn't.
So he heard me talking about it with him. I was like talking about the just war stuff, and I think Rob thought that's where the conversation was going to mainly be. But I thought woke right was more important of an issue for people to understand what the origins of that term is, who's the one spouting it, and not just that. I mean, if you see the people backing it, you want to pull up some of Abby's tweets. I mean,
I actually have them pulled up.
It's some of the most heinous stuff I've ever seen. Like, Christian Zionism is evil, guys. I'm sorry. It just is. Like, the Christian Zionists, the Palestinian Society cheers dead Israeli babies. I don't care if their children die. They deserve, like, I'm afraid to read this on air.
Well, I mean, it's pro-Zionism, so it should be fine to read on air.
Yeah. Yeah, YouTube will care about that.
They deserve to watch.
I mean, change the Palestinian to and the opposite to the opposite.
But, I mean,
I
guys,
hate to play that game. I think that game's dumb.
If you're listening on audio, I'm sorry, I won't even read the rest of that because it's something so heinous that they'll tag your video on. There are no civilians in Gaza. Hamas has drafted everyone down to the newest babies into the war effort, and they rejoice in the children they shove into the line of fire die because it's their most powerful weapon again. Like, it's just so crazy. The
1.2K likes to 6.2K replies is insane on that
ratio. I'm gonna look, and even the fact that Matt's comments on his video got 9-to-1 ratio against is a telling sign that I don't think this is an easy. This is like, I see the tide shifting on this issue. So, like I said, I have absolutely no ill will towards either of those guys. If they ever want to have a conversation privately, I would absolutely be open to it. It's not,
same.
Same thing. So, all right, we're going to jump over to the other side, guys. Join us over there. If you guys aren't local subscribers, you're missing out on the best part of the show. Rob, take us out.
Okay, I'm just going to remove it here real quick.
Subscribe to Traditional Thomist on YouTube if you're not already.
And Scholastic Answers.
Scholastic Answers. Not, It's, I'm mixing.
Yeah, don't send them to Nick.
Traditional Thomist.
Yeah, don't send them to Nick.
Screw you, Christian.
Yeah. Traditional Thomist is Nick's channel. Scholastic Answers is Christian's channel. Subscribe to both of those. We'll see you guys over on Locals.
Okay, give me just a second to remove these.